The city moved like a restless tide that morning, rushing, pushing, spilling through streets that had long forgotten the meaning of slowing down. Yet amidst the noise, the footsteps, the honking cars and blinking billboards, there was a silence that seemed louder than everything else. A woman sat near the corner of an old bus stop, her thin arms wrapped around a frayed blanket, her eyes fixed on the passing crowds, as if searching for someone, anyone, who might look back. Her name was Miriam, though no one stopped long enough to ask it. For most people, she was just another invisible soul blending into the concrete. But today, something was different. Today, she would ask a question so simple, so fragile, that it would stop the heart of a man who thought he was too busy to feel anything at all. And from that one question, 2 lives would change forever. If you believe kindness still matters in this world, and if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support spreads these stories to more hearts. Miriam had once lived a life that felt ordinary but full of small joys. A warm kitchen, evening tea, a tiny balcony where she would sit with her husband, dreaming of better days. But life is unpredictable, and sometimes one tragedy arrives with the weight of 10. When her husband passed away suddenly and the medical bills swallowed everything they owned, Miriam found herself drifting from shelter to shelter, searching for stability in a world that seemed to shrink around her. The street became her only home, the sky her only roof. Each night she whispered to herself that tomorrow would be different, that somewhere in the world someone still cared. But tomorrow often looked too much like yesterday, and hope became something she had to convince herself to keep. That cold morning, her stomach clenched from hunger, her hands trembled inside her sleeves, and she wondered how much longer she could keep pretending. That strength alone would carry her through. She watched people walking by, parents holding their children's hands, students laughing as they crossed the road, office workers hurrying with coffee cups and important schedules. They all seemed like visitors from another world, a world she once belonged to but could no longer touch. She wasn't asking for much anymore. Not dreams, not promises, not miracles. Just a moment of kindness, a glance of acknowledgement, a feeling that she hadn't vanished from the earth. On the other side of the street, Daniel moved with purpose. He was the kind of man who rarely slowed down. His success had come with years of dedication, the kind that demanded early mornings and late nights, and he had learned to walk fast, think fast, and dismiss anything that didn't contribute to the next step in his career. But deep inside, buried beneath layers of achievements and responsibilities, there lived a boy who used to sit with his grandmother on peaceful Sunday evenings, listening to her stories about compassion, humility, and the beauty of giving. Those lessons had faded under the weight of adulthood, but they had never disappeared completely. As Daniel approached the bus stop, his phone buzzed with reminders and deadlines. He barely noticed the woman seated beside the bench until he was just a few steps away. Something about her posture, tired yet dignified, fragile yet composed, caught his attention in a way he couldn't explain. He felt a strange pull, as though life itself had paused just so he could notice her. Miriam gathered what little courage she had left. Her voice trembled inside her chest, trapped between fear and the desperate need to be heard. She wasn't asking for money, or food, or help. She was asking something far more human, far more powerful. She lifted her head and softly asked the only question she could think of, a question that had been pressing against her heart for too long. Her simple question was, "Do you think people still see someone like me?" The moment the words left her lips, Daniel felt them hit him like a wave. He wasn't prepared for how deeply they would cut through his guarded life. He looked at her, not at her worn-out shoes, not at her blanket or the dust on her clothes, but at her eyes. Eyes that held exhaustion, fear, and a quiet longing to simply be acknowledged. In that moment, Daniel felt the world narrow into a single, undeniable truth. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't a number or a statistic. She was a person with a past, a present, and a story still unfolding. The generous answer he gave her wasn't spoken with words at first. His heart answered before his mouth could. He sat beside her, lowering himself onto the edge of the bench, ignoring the shocked glances of people passing by. And in that quiet space between two strangers, something unspoken formed, a bridge of understanding, of recognition, of shared humanity. He told her gently and sincerely that she was seen, that her presence mattered, that her question was not just valid but powerful. And as he spoke, Miriam felt warmth spreading inside a heart that had been cold for far too long. Tears gathered in her eyes, sliding down her cheeks not from sorrow but from relief. Relief that someone, finally, had looked at her as a human being again. But Daniel didn't stop there. Something inside him had awakened, something he had forgotten existed. He asked about her life, her struggles, her dreams she had buried beneath the weight of survival. She told him about her husband, her home that was gone, her longing to work again, to feel useful, to feel alive. And as she spoke, Daniel realized how easily life could crumble, how thin the line was between stability and collapse. Her story humbled him. He stood up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years and offered her not just words, but a path, one built on genuine help, not pity. He took her to a nearby cafe, letting her choose a warm meal. As she ate slowly, savoring every bite, he made calls that set in motion the beginning of her new chapter. He arranged for temporary shelter, assistance, and even an interview opportunity with a local community center looking for helpers. He didn't do this for recognition or applause. He did it because her question had reminded him that kindness must not be a rare occurrence. It must be a responsibility. Over the next few weeks, Miriam's life began to shift. She moved into a safe shelter where she had a bed, food, and warmth. She took small steps toward healing, rebuilding trust in herself and in the world. She secured the job at the community center, greeting visitors at the front desk with a smile that reflected both gratitude and newfound hope. People began to notice her, not as a homeless woman, not as a shadow among crowds, but as Miriam, a woman with warmth in her voice and gentle strength in her presence. Daniel continued to visit her from time to time, not because he felt obligated, but because her resilience inspired him. She reminded him of the values he once held dear, values that had been buried under ambition. Her transformation sparked something inside him too. He began volunteering on weekends, offering mentorship to those who felt lost in life, and as he did, he discovered a version of himself that felt whole, grounded, and fulfilled in a way no corporate success had ever made him feel. Months later, the city looked different to both of them. For Miriam, it no longer felt like an endless maze designed to swallow her whole. It felt like a place where she could breathe, contribute, and belong. For Daniel, it was no longer just a landscape of deadlines and profits. It was a place filled with people whose lives could be touched with a small act of compassion. One evening, Miriam stood outside the community center after closing, the soft breeze brushing against her face. She looked up at the sky, remembering the days when she had felt forgotten, and she whispered a quiet, "Thank you." Not to the universe, not to fate, but to the courage she'd found inside herself to ask one simple question. Because without that question, she would still be a silent figure in the crowd, unseen and unheard. But the truth was, she had never been invisible. The world had just forgotten to look, and sometimes, all it takes is one generous heart to change the direction of a life. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us bring more meaningful stories to people who need them. Before we end, please comment below, what does kindness mean to you? Miriam's story is a reminder that one question can rewrite a destiny, and one answer given with sincerity can light up a life that has been living in darkness for far too long.